Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever stopped to wonder how your brain actually figures things out? I mean, you learn new skills, you remember faces, you solve problems every single day. But what's the incredible machinery doing inside your head to make all that happen? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on that process. We're doing a deep dive into cognitive theories of learning. We've got this really fascinating source, an article from Self Sensei, and it's basically our guide through the history, the core ideas, the big names, and maybe the surprising places these theories pop up in your life.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating is the huge shift this whole area represented. For a long time, psychology, especially behaviorism, was almost entirely focused on what you could see. Observable behavior, external things. The mind was like this black box, right? And learners were often seen as, well, a blank slate, just reacting. Cognitive theories were brave enough to say, okay, let's actually open that box. They started focusing on the internal stuff, memory, attention, how you think, solve problems, even how you think about your own thinking. Metacognition.
Right. So our mission today is to kind of trace that journey, that cognitive revolution. We'll break down the key concepts, dive into some landmark theories, see where these ideas have made a real difference, education, AI, therapy, and then, yeah, look honestly at the limitations too.
Exactly. And the goal, really, for you listening, is to give you a better framework for understanding your own learning. By getting a handle on how information is acquired, processed, stored, used, well, maybe you'll gain some valuable insights into how you learn best, maybe even how to learn better.
So let's rewind a bit. Where did this all start? You mentioned behaviorism was the big thing. What was that like? Who are the key players?
That's right. Before this cognitive shift, you had figures like Pavlov, Watson, Skinner, huge names. Their work was all about stimulus response, conditioning, focusing purely on observable actions, the internal world, thoughts, feelings. That was sort of off limits for scientific study, or at least seen as less important than the environment.
So what changed? What made people want to look inside that black box?
Well, by the mid-1900s, researchers were finding that purely behaviorist explanations just felt, well, inadequate, especially for complex things humans do, like how do you explain language? Just through reinforcement. It seems unlikely. Or solving new problems you've never seen before. There was this growing intellectual dissatisfaction, a sense that something really important was being missed. And this era had some pivotal moments in thinkers. You had George A. Miller talking about the limits of our immediate memory span, that famous 7 plus or minus 2 idea. Ulrich Neisser helped formalize things, even coined the term cognitive psychology.
And here's where it gets really interesting, something highlighted in our source. The big showdown. Skinner versus Noam Chomsky over language. Skinner wrote Verbal Behavior, trying to explain language with just conditioning.
Yes, and Chomsky's critique was just devastating for that view. He argued, really forcefully, that language is way too complex, too creative. Kids pick it up too fast for it to be just simple reinforcement. He proposed we must have some innate capacity for language, maybe a language acquisition device, a universal grammar. His point about the poverty of the stimulus, kids hear messy, imperfect language but develop amazing linguistic skills. There was a powerful blow to the idea that learning is all external.
And around the same time, Jean Piaget's work on developmental stages was gaining more traction, right? Showing that kids don't just think less, they think differently at different ages.
Exactly. His work had started earlier, but it fit into this growing shift. And then critically, you have the rise of computers. This gave researchers a really powerful metaphor. The mind as an information processor. Input, process, store, output. It offered a new framework, a way to think about mental processes systematically.
So putting it all together, it wasn't just one thing, it was like a perfect storm. Dissatisfaction, new findings, Chomsky, Piaget, the computer metaphor.
Precisely. A convergence of factors leading to this cognitive revolution. Psychology could finally start exploring inside the mind in a structured way.
Okay, revolution achieved. Focus shifts inward. So what did they see as the key mental building blocks? What are the core principles, the stuff between stimulus and response?
Good question. Instead of just the reaction, they zeroed in on specific internal processes. First up, memory. Obvious one, maybe, but crucial. It's how we hold on to information. It involves getting info in encoding, keeping it their storage, and getting it back out retrieval. The key insight, memory isn't simple. It's complex, different stages, different types. Then you've got attention. Think of it like your mental spotlight. It's focusing on some things, filtering out others. You can't process everything, right? So attention is the gatekeeper. Decides what even gets into your awareness to be learned. Next, perception. This is how you interpret what your senses pick up. It's not just passive receiving. It's actively making sense of input based on your past experiences context. The insight is perception is constructive. You partly see what you expect to see. Problem solving, another big one. The mental strategies you use to tackle challenges. The insight here is we use identifiable internal processes, not just random trial and error. We break things down, explore options, evaluate. And finally, this is a really empowering one. Metacognition, literally thinking about thinking. Your awareness of your own cognitive processes and your ability to control them. The insight. Being metacognitive makes you a more strategic learner. You know when you get something, when you don't, how to plan your study.
That metacognition piece feels linked to another core idea you mentioned, active knowledge construction. This feels central. It's the opposite of the blank slate. Learners aren't passive sponges. You actively engage, connect new info to old, organize it meaningfully for you. You're building understanding.
Exactly. And how do we build and organize that? Through schemas. Think of schemas as your mental filing cabinets or maybe blueprints. They organize everything you know based on your experiences. When new information comes in, you try to fit it into an existing schema. Piaget called that assimilation. But sometimes it doesn't fit. Then you need accommodation. You either change an existing schema or create a whole new one. The powerful thing is, schemas don't just store knowledge, they shape how you see new things. Learning often means changing those structures.
And the information processing model, that computer metaphor, acts as the overall map, right? Showing information flowing through stages.
Right. Input, processing, storage, retrieval. It gave a way to visualize these internal steps, especially early on. So yeah, pull these principles together. Active construction uses schemas. Attention perception feed the system. Metacognition manages it, all within this idea of information processing. It's a much richer picture.
Okay, so based on those core ideas, different theorists developed more specific models. Let's dive into some of the big ones from our source.
Absolutely. Can't talk cognitive theories without Jean Piaget. His theory of cognitive development was revolutionary for understanding kids' thinking. The core insight. Cognitive growth isn't just about knowing more. It's about thinking in fundamentally different, qualitatively distinct ways as you mature. Kids are active explorers. He laid out 4 stages. Sensoromotor, birth to 2-ish. Learning through senses, actions, big milestone. Object permanence, things exist even as hidden. Pre-operational, 2 to 7. Symbolic thought arrives language, pretend play. But thinking is still egocentric, illogical. They struggle with conservation, like pouring water into a different shaped glass. Concrete operational, 7 to 11. Logical thought kicks in, but tied to concrete things. They get conservation, reversibility, can think logically about what's real. Formal operational, 11 plus. Hello, abstract thought, hypothetical reasoning, systematic problem solving, metacognition really takes off. Thinking about possibilities.
Piaget's work really hits home that you have to teach kids differently at different ages, doesn't it? It's about matching the how of thinking.
Totally. Now, building on that information processing idea, we get specific theories about memory. The Atkinson-Shiffrin model was that early influential 3-stage view. Sensory memory. A very brief holding pen for raw sensory info, like fractions of a second. Huge capacity, tiny duration. Pay attention, and info moves to short-term memory, STM, or what we often call working memory, WM, now. This is your mental workbench, what you're processing right now. Key insight here. Limited capacity. Think Miller's 7 plus megas 2 in short duration, maybe 15, 30 seconds, unless you actively work on it. WM emphasizes its active, simple repetition. Maintenance rehearsal keeps it in WM, but to really learn it, you need to get it to. Long-term memory, LTM, your vast, seemingly permanent storage. Unlimited capacity, long duration, but encoding it effectively and retrieving it later, that's the challenge. Then you have Craig and Lockhart's levels of processing model. Their big insight, how deeply you process information matters more than just where it's stored. Shallow processing, focusing on surface features, like how a word looks or sounds. Weak memory trace. Deep processing, semantic processing, focusing on meaning, connecting it to what you already know, creating mental images. That leads to much stronger memory.
That's such a practical takeaway for anyone learning anything. Engage with the meaning, don't just repeat.
Exactly. And then a more detailed view of that active workspace came from Baddeley and Hitch's model of working memory. Their insight. WM isn't one box. It's a dynamic system with parts. A central executive manages attention, coordinates everything, like a conductor. Then, slave systems, the phonological loop for sound-verbal info, your inner voice repeating a phone number, the visual-spatial sketchpad for visual-spatial stuff, imagining rearranging furniture. Later, they added the episodic buffer, to integrate info from these components in LTM into coherent episodes.
So that explains why it's hard to listen to two conversations at once, but easier to listen to one while picturing something.
Precisely. They use different parts of the working memory system. These models map the journey information takes and highlight levers we can pull, like deep processing.
Which leads nicely into the next one, right? Cognitive load theory.
Absolutely. Cognitive load theory, CLT from John Sweller. The core idea, your working memory is limited, and how information is presented really impacts learning by managing the load on that WM. He talks about 3 types of load. Intrinsic load, just how complex the material itself is. Calculus is intrinsically harder than basic addition. Manage this by breaking it down. Extraneous load, this is the bad kind. Load caused by how it's presented, confusing instructions, distracting graphics, irrelevant stuff. Minimize this. It wastes WM capacity. Germane load, this is the good stuff. The mental effort you spend actually understanding, processing meaningfully, building schemas. Optimize this.
Okay, so the goal is to reduce the junk load.
Reduce extraneous, manage intrinsic.
To free up space for the actual learning, the germane load.
You got it. Keep the total load within limits. This has huge implications for designing teaching materials, websites, everything. Make it clear, focused.
It makes so much sense, that feeling of being overwhelmed by a messy presentation. That's extraneous load killing your working memory.
Exactly. And we should also mention Jerome Bruner. He really emphasized the learner's active role and how knowledge is structured. Bruner was big on discovery learning, learners exploring, figuring things out, with the teacher guiding. He also talked about 3 ways we represent knowledge: an active, action-based, like learning to ride a bike; iconic, image-based; and symbolic, language, abstract symbols.
Okay.
The insight. Instruction can often move through these modes from concrete to abstract. And he proposed the spiral curriculum. Introduce core ideas simply early on, then revisit them in increasing depth and complexity later. His famous line, any subject can be taught effectively to any child at any stage of development if you structure it right. It's about building layers of understanding.
So Bruner really underscores that learning is an active investigation and teaching is about structuring that journey effectively. Okay, so those are some foundational theories, but the field kept evolving, right? How did it connect with other ideas?
Yeah, definitely didn't stand still. One important evolution is cognitive constructivism. It builds heavily on Piaget. The key insight here is that knowledge isn't just constructed, it's actively and subjectively constructed by you, based on your unique experiences and existing mental structures. Meaning-making is personal. Motivation here is seen as largely intrinsic, the drive to understand. Now, coming from a slightly different angle, you have sociocultural theory, most associated with Vygotsky. While it's cognitive, the critical insight is that learning is fundamentally social. It's shaped by culture and language. Vygotsky argued higher mental functions start socially between people, then become internalized. Key concepts: the more knowledgeable other, MKO, learning with someone more skilled, teacher, peer, even helpful tool, and the zone of proximal development, ZPD. That's the sweet spot, what you can do with help, but not yet alone. Learning thrives here. This is often supported by scaffolding temporary help that's gradually withdrawn.
So Vygotsky adds this whole layer. It's not just in your head. It's about interactions, culture, the tools you use, especially language.
Exactly. Language is key for communication and for thought itself, moving from social speech to inner speech. The powerful insight, learning is deeply embedded in our social world. And bringing us more up to date, cognitive neuroscience tries to connect these theories to the actual brain. The goal is to find the biological underpinnings of memory, attention, all these processes. They use tools like fMRI to see where brain activity happens during tasks, and EEG to see when it happens with millisecond precision. Combining them is really powerful. Findings often support cognitive models, different memory systems showing distinct brain networks, for instance. And concepts like neuroplasticity, the brain literally changing with learning, fit perfectly with ideas of active construction and schema building. It grounds the theories in biology.
Wow, so it's seeing the physical reality behind concepts like working memory or deep processing. It's not just abstract anymore. Okay, so these theories are clearly powerful, but they're not just for academics, right? Where do we see them making a difference in the real world? For you, the listener.
Well, absolutely. Education is probably the biggest area. These theories really shifted the focus from just memorizing facts to fostering real understanding. So practical things in classrooms today: helping students build schemas, activating prior knowledge using concept maps, strategies for managing cognitive load chunking information, using clear visuals, avoiding distractions in materials. CLT is everywhere in good instructional design. Scaffolding complex tasks, drawing on Vygotsky and Bruner, Big emphasis on active learning discussions, problem-based learning, inquiry projects, even things like Bloom's taxonomy, guiding objectives from recall to higher-order thinking like analysis and creation, align with these cognitive principles. And teaching metacognitive strategies helping students become aware of and manage their own learning. That's huge for self-regulation. Then there's cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. This is a major force in mental health, and it's built directly on cognitive principles. The core idea: thoughts, feelings, behaviors are linked. Psychological distress often comes from unhelpful, distorted thinking patterns. CBT helps people identify their underlying schemas or core beliefs and notice their automatic thoughts, those quick, often negative thoughts that pop up. It teaches people to spot cognitive distortions like catastrophizing or overgeneralizing. Therapy then involves examining these thoughts, evaluating their validity, and actively restructuring them. Change the thinking, change the feeling and behavior. Techniques like thought records come straight from this.
That's fascinating. Understanding your own thought processes is the key to feeling better.
Yeah. And cognitive theories also influence artificial intelligence, AI, especially early symbolic AI. Concepts like schemas influenced how AI researchers tried to represent knowledge in systems. Problem-solving algorithms in AI often drew inspiration from human cognitive strategies. It's been a bit of a two-way street, actually. Cognitive science informs AI, and AI models can sometimes be used to test ideas about human cognition, and something you interact with constantly. Human-computer interaction, HCI. Designing usable technology relies heavily on understanding human cognition. Designers think about users' mental models. They use visual design to guide attention. They design systems that rely on recognition rather than recall. Clicking menus is easier than remembering commands, right? That supports our memory. Good design supports problem solving by making workflows intuitive. It uses principles of perception to make interfaces clear and easy to understand.
So every time I use an app that just feels right, intuitive. That's cognitive psychology applied to design.
Pretty much. Making tech work with our cognitive strengths and limitations.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. The theories, the evolution, the applications. Let's zoom out and recap the big strengths. What makes this cognitive approach so powerful?
Well, a huge one is the focus on understanding, not just memorization. It aims for deeper, more meaningful, more durable learning. It champions active learning. Seeing the learner as an active constructor encourages engagement, exploration, which leads to better comprehension and motivation. These theories give us frameworks for developing crucial problem-solving skills and abstract thought. The emphasis on metacognition is incredibly valuable. It helps people become more strategic, self-directed, effective lifelong learners. It provides a more comprehensive model of learning than behaviorism did by including those internal mental states. It helps explain why people learn differently. And as we saw, the broad applications across education, therapy, AI, HCI, that speaks volumes about its practical utility. Ultimately, by giving us insight into how we learn, it helps us learn better and faster.
Yeah, it feels like it fundamentally shifted our view of the learner from passive receiver to active thinker. But, okay, no theory is perfect. What are the downsides, the limitations, the criticisms we need to keep in mind?
Right. A big one historically is the unobservability issue. Mental processes aren't directly visible. We infer them from behavior or brain scans. That can make objective measurement tricky compared to watching overt actions. There's also been criticism of potential reductionism. Especially early on, some theories might have focused too heavily on cognition and sort of downplayed the crucial roles of emotion, social context, motivation, biology. And the computer analogy, while useful, is definitely an oversimplification. The brain isn't a serial processor like early computers. It's massively parallel, deeply affected by biology, experience, emotions in ways computers aren't. Another point is ecological validity. A lot of early research was done in controlled labs. Do findings always translate perfectly to the complex, messy reality of learning in a classroom or the real world? Maybe not always. There are specific criticisms, too. Early information processing models were sometimes seen as too linear, not capturing parallel processing well. And maybe study processes too much in isolation. For Piaget, some argue he underestimated what younger kids can do. His methods were sometimes criticized for small samples. And those rigid stages. Development might be more fluid, more variable across cultures and individuals. For cognitive load theory, actually measuring the different load types precisely in real time is hard. Plus, the expertise reversal effect shows that what helps a novice can actually hinder an expert, so it's not one size fits all. And you still get critiques from other viewpoints. Behaviorists might remain skeptical of focusing on the unseen mind. Some constructivists might feel even cognitive models can be too mechanistic, not fully capturing subjective meaning-making. Connectionism, Using neural network models offers a different way entirely, focused on connections and patterns rather than explicit rules and symbols.
It's a good reminder that these are models, tools for understanding, not necessarily absolute truth. And the field keeps evolving based on new evidence. So, looking back at our journey today, we went from behaviorism's focus on the outside to the cognitive revolution looking inside the mind. We explored key concepts like schemas, working memory, attention, met thinkers like Piaget, Bruner, Vygotsky, dived into models like information processing, cognitive load, saw the link to neuroscience.
And crucially, we saw how these aren't just textbook ideas. They shape education, therapy, technology design, AI, things that impact your life directly.
It's clearly a field that's still active, still integrating new findings, building a richer picture of how we think and learn.
So maybe a final thought for you listening. Based on everything we've discussed about actively constructing knowledge, about your own schemas shaping perception, about attention and processing, what does it really mean for you to truly know something, beyond just recalling facts? How is your mind right now taking in the world and making sense of it all?
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.